Hello, my name's Ben Hunt. I know it's a very ironic name as a vegan animal rights activist. A fun fact, though, the fun fact is that I'm not a stand-up. I'm not doing any interaction here. What is it with all these coroners? Am I right? No. But I am related to Shakespeare, so you can call me Ben Shakespeare if you like. I say it all the time. It's like 13 degrees cousins, so everyone's like Shakespeare's cousin, really, by 13 degrees. But I like to just flex that muscle now and then. So if you want to call me Ben Shakespeare, go for it. Okay, so we're looking at navigating power, story, and system change. That's a mouthful, and this is a new thing. I'll talk a bit about myself in a second, but the whole thing about this talk is deciding about which campaigns do we run, because we're spoiled for choice, right? Unfortunately, we're spoiled for choice. And not in theory as well. We're so absorbed by theory, which is great, which is fine, and that's my background. Theory is my background. But in practice, what does that look like? And I know many of you around the room are deep within this practice right now and deep within this theory right now. So this is my position, and there are some threads to it that may resonate with you or may not resonate with you, and this is hopefully a conversation starter. This is a bit of a detour from my research, but it's also not, and I'll explain in a second. So if you're an organisation or an activist with limited time, limited resources, limited possible campaigns in front of you, can I get a hell yeah? I didn't put that in there, but the stand-up thing, I'm riding off that now. But how do we choose? Do we choose the one that helps the most animals? Do we choose the most winnable, the most morally right? What feels good to us? Because they're not all the same thing, right? The biggest campaigns in our movement are things that maybe morally we feel a bit ambiguous about, or even a bit tense about. And vice versa. We on the streets going, everyone, can't you not see the truth here? Let's all go vegan. Let's do it. But no one changes. You shower the top of our lungs and nothing happens. So there's a real tension there, and that's what I'm going to explore today. Yeah, and me, I am, like I said, Ben Shakespeare. And so my background, you might see, this is me last year here. I overuse this because this is the only time you see me in the wild, because I'm usually in my house full of rabbits. And that was me speaking with for animal equality on stage. So my background is campaigning with animal equality, but also volunteering as well. But also a big passion of mine, and my research is performance, hence the Shakespeare, hence the stand-up routine. That's my PhD, performance in animal rights activism. And there's a link here, and if you were in the talk just a minute ago with Pip and Helen, you'll see a direct line, because they give so much context to what I'm talking about. They're amazing, and they gave us so much depth into how art is important. I'm going off a bit to talk about narrative, but it's all linked. And I would say there's a lot of talk about narrative, but I like to say that creativity and art is probably at the heart of narrative. So I look at creative interventions. So that's me as I'm an agent from the future, and I'm outside Barclays Bank, and I did a little speech about, and I did an American accent, I think. I was like, we're from the future, and we're going to close Barclays Bank because of animal agriculture. Carnage, am I right? And then there's loads of police people who were there, and it looked really good, but they weren't there for us, but it looked like they were there for us, so that was a creative intervention. That's an example of a creative intervention. I look at narrative theory. I'm really interested in ethical representation, and I'm developing a artistic lens, like a critical lens called zooclasm, where we look at how we ethically represent non-humans. And also, I do campaigning. I've been in Amsterdam like 7 times last year with animal equality outside a food place, a Holdell Hayes, protesting against cages. So there's an interesting thing here, because I'm going to criticize that. Okay, so I asked you before we got going, which campaign brought you here? And what I mean is, you would have been moved at some point from going from either non-vegan to vegan or non-active to active. And what moved me to be active was bearing witness. So that's outside the local slaughterhouse in Newcastle. And that was my first active campaign. and it really resonated with me, and I really connected me to activism. So as we go through this, I want you to think about that moment that happened for you, because I'm putting a bet on that it wasn't what a lot of us will be talking at this conference today about. Maybe. I don't know. I don't speak for you, but emotionally, that's my provocation to you. A lot of this might be a bit provocational. Not provoking, provocational. I don't know the difference. Is there a difference? The Shakespeare gene has been watered down. It's been watered right down, okay? There's a little bit there somewhere, but apparently like 8 generations it goes, but I'm going to hold on to that. So Watership Index. Has anyone seen Watership Down or read Watership Down? Is it a kind of dream? There you go. It's about rabbits who escape impending doom from human destruction and go on an adventure. So the reason why I chose Watership, the Watership as a name, is because of Watership Down, the book, which is my favourite book. And these rabbits, they use intuition. They don't use strength. They use cunning. They use stories, and they use relationships, and they use communication to survive and to get by. And I think that perfectly encapsulates what I'm trying to get at here. They use what's in front of them, which is pragmatics. Thank you, pragmatism. But they also use creativity, initiative, and communication. And that is where I'm getting at here. So, the dilemma. Campaign selection is structurally imbalanced. That's my first second provocation. The dilemma is winnable campaigns can entrench limited narratives, i.e. what I was just talking about when I was outside Hotel Hayes headquarters. I was going, I want a cage-free policy. But inside, my inner vegan is going, no, I don't want a cage-free policy. I want a no animal abuse at all policy. But we take what we can get in this regard, especially with NGOs. So we think about numerical scale, we think of cost effectiveness, we think of political tractability. That's where the money is, baby. Okay? So if you want a load of money, show me the numbers. Okay? That's my personal experience anyway. And transformative campaigns can fail without structural leverage. So we can be as utopian as we like, but people are not going to listen. So there's a real imbalance here. And the Watership Index is to try and grab that, okay, and go, okay, how can we bridge these two? How can we integrate these two? So there's the gap. So, like I said, there's existing tools, measuring feasibility, explain narrative change, and track social values. We've got these things. We've got all the tools we need. But perhaps they lack feasibility, narrative consequence. So thinking, what I mean by that is, by we've managed to stop cages, or we've shut this down, or whatever. What are the consequences? That might be good consequences, there might be bad consequences. What I mean is liberation consequences. Where does the narrative drive us there? And I'll go into further depth about that as well. And strategic interaction, which is they're all big words, but I'll get into them. So, my third provocation, durable systems change. Change requires both structural and winnability and narrative transformation. We need all these to succeed, I believe. And here's a little diagram to show that. So we've got pragmatic winnability here, which is your numbers, which is political appetite, which is consumer appetite, all these different things. You've got narrative and cultural power, which is the stories we tell, which is the most persuasive to the people, the public, to the politicians, to companies. And then we've got this juicy bit in the middle, integration and durability, which I'll go into further detail as well. So yeah, like I said, symbolic clarity as well. Emotional resonance is a big one. That's the question I asked you at the beginning. What brought you here? And so you can have two very different campaigns, which I'll talk about a bit later. One could be really pragmatically winnable and do great, and one can be narratively very powerful and do great. But sometimes they don't come together, and sometimes they don't complement each other. Sometimes they're quite different in approach and in different ideologies. And you'll hear ideologies popping around all weekend, which is great. That's the whole point of conferences, right? Sharing ideas, testing them out, and this is one of them. So here's one. I've got 3 examples. Cage-free. So like I said, I spent most of last year wanting a cage-free policy. I was shouting at the top of my lungs, I want a cage-free policy. But my inner activist was stabbing me in the heart at the time. Good news though, we just got it. Got it like last week, after a year. So round of applause, absolutely. Policy might be a strong word, but we'll see. Is a commitment. So cage-free corporate campaigns are typically viewed as highly tractable interventions that can improve conditions for a very large number of animals. Absolutely. That's not denying that. And corporations, whether we like it or not, have a lot of power, especially in this capitalist society. So it makes sense for us to really put money and effort into this. Absolutely. There's no denying that. So pragmatic winnability is high. We can get these cages free. The cages disappear. Obviously, the chickens will still be there in those systems, those strict systems. But yes, we can improve their lives to a certain degree. Fantastic. But narratively, it's a bit weak, right? We could turn around and say, well, I eat free range, blah, 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 blah. And it doesn't talk about the ongoing exploitation. It doesn't talk about the end goal, which I'm very sure that 99.999% of you would say that's the goal, that's what got us in the first place. And it's quite hard to mix it up because we're really going hard for cage-free, and that's the messaging. So how on earth are we going to get the liberation story in there? Also, do we need to? My argument is we do, if we want to be united as a movement. Do we want to be united as a movement? My argument is we should be, but that's also a debate I'm very happy to go back and forth on. So with the Watership Index, there's like it highlights the gap. That's the whole point of the index really, is to go, we see these two sides and there's a clear gap here. But how do we address it? And the Watership Index isn't putting one thing and then going, here's the solution. It's going, here is the gap. And perhaps that is how we frame the narratives. So I've said here that we should strengthen our narrative around this more. So it's less about the sound bites of cage-free policy, but there's more nuance, there's more of an addressing of this is the first step. And by all means, being behind the scenes in NGOs, like I was last year, that is the conversations. Everyone there is there for the right reasons. They're going, this is their next step, this is the pressure campaign. Absolutely, we've heard that before. But we can be more front-facing with that as well. And that's what the Watership Index is trying to do. So that's cage-free. I appreciate I'm zipping through this, so hold tight. Octopus farming. So luckily it's not happening in the UK, unless, is there any octopus farming here in the UK now? I think there is. And they're really trying, there's a Spanish company trying it, but it's not doing very well. And the reason I put that there is because this is an open goal for narrative. But you're like, Ben, what's going on because it's not happening? What's the point? Well, the point is it reinforces a narrative, right? That it's a key. It's a key to understanding why we decide not to do stuff. Why would we not start an octopus farm? Well, they're, in human terms, they're intelligent. They're complex. The narrative we already have of octopus is quite morally strong. So why not have a campaign about, did you hear they're trying to start this? This should never, ever happen. And that saves lives before we even get there. So there's a really interesting way of using campaigns as narrative, way over pragmatic, really, because it hasn't even started yet. Which is great. It also opens up the idea of, well, if an octopus is intelligence, what does intelligence mean? Is intelligence important? What is, and it unravels this whole narrative. And we can really go to town on it. So octopus farming. So Watership Index there has actually went, okay, here's something that we're maybe not putting loads of money into or not putting loads of effort into, but it's something that it's on the precipice. So why not go strong? And that will feed into other campaigns because of that. And then greyhound racing. Can I get a whoop for greyhound racing? Because we just banned in Scotland and Wales. Big shout out to Shut Down Campaigns at the back, Norb there, for leading amazing, and Animal Aid, and all the great NGOs and activists that are really doing incredible work with it. And greyhound races is probably the perfect example of what I mean when the narrative kind of comes together with the pragmatic winnability. So it's been grinding away, but the narrative has been super strong for a long time, because as the classic saying of, as a country of animal lovers, which we're not, and if you go to Shakira Free's talk, I don't know what she's talking about today, but she's very good at going, well, we're not animal lovers, even when it comes to dogs, we're awful. But that's the narrative, right? We love dogs. And the narrative has been clear for a long time. And campaigns such as the Shutdown campaign and Animal Aid and all the local activists as well doing stuff, it's super strong. I've been at some of those protests, and the beeps, the real strong support there. Obviously there's kickback like there usually is, but there's been a real slog to try and get it over the line pragmatically. Because there's things involved like class, which is very understandable, of course. I mean, horse racing is a higher class, and then we've got the lower class with greyhound racing, so there's this kind of political tension there. But it's getting over the line because narrative is really pushing, and it's opening those pragmatic doors. So it's a strong campaign. And we've got to a point now where it's not a welfare issue anymore. It's a philosophical and delegitimization reason. It's saying, well, it's not about making it better for the dogs, it's this isn't good enough, ever going to be good enough. So it's a great example of narrative really pushing the pragmatic winnability over the line. I mean, you'd look at it and go, well, pragmatically it's winnable, but unfortunately it's not been the case. Fingers crossed, keep up the good work. England is next. Oh, that sounds like I'm a Viking. England is next! To be a Viking. I've just rushed through that. There's loads on those slides, but that's kind of what I'm trying to get at here. There's these 3 different case studies that I picked, and you could pick as many as you like. I've picked this one purely because I think it would get some of people's hairs on the back of the necks going, "What are you doing, Ben? That's about this is pragmatic at its most winnable." And I get it. I do get it. But I've been in the belly of the beast, not the nasty beast, the NGO beast, which is a nice beast. And I don't know, I do think they're cornered sometimes to pick these campaigns. And they do help, is a strong word, but help a lot of animals, but it does not lead to the narrative of liberation. The question is, do we need that narrative? I argue that we do. So the question isn't simply which campaign scores the highest, it's whether our overall strategy moves the moral and political terrain, is what I'm saying. So there's some strategic takeaways, like we can develop types of campaigns like harm reduction campaigns, preventive intervention, and delegitimization, which is the greyhound one. Not all wins produce the same long-term movement impact. I mean, I didn't really think about it, and maybe I should have, but I'm trying to think of a campaign that has really pushed that. And there are examples outside the animal movement, such as smoking, where it was seen as a personal concern, and then it became a public health concern. So then it started moving people, especially with, I remember quite vividly actually, the secondhand smoke thing. Like, no, you shouldn't be in a room with other people smoking. So it wasn't just about that person smoking, it was about the children in the room. Think of the children. So yeah, and then plastic straws. I know that's a bit of it's on like a personal choice thing, but pictures of turtles and whales swallowing straws and stuff really helped that narrative drive it forward. So there are these long-term narrative shifts that happen that I can pick outside the animal movement for sure. And there's a little table which kind of sums up what I'm kind of talking about. And just so you know, this isn't just me sitting on my armchair smoking a pipe. Classic Shakespeare. I am a researcher at heart, so I've done a lot of reading in my time. So there's things like political opportunity theory, there's narrative policy framework, which I'm sure some of you are aware of that. There's a real deep research, and I think we could do a lot of, we're doing a lot of work anyway as a movement, looking into that, and this is one of these examples of that. A frame and agenda, and just to highlight, again, from me being in the inside of seeing what funders like. They like these frameworks, they like these interesting theories that kind of give us reasons to do things, which is really interesting, and I think we should as a movement take more control over that as an animal movement, because these theories are coming from all over the different spectrums, which is fine and we should use them. But what about the specific animal ones, especially when we talk about representation, especially when we talk about ethical representation like Pip and Helen talked about before, but how do we ethically represent? And I would argue it's art and creativity for sure, and that's linked to narrative. So yeah, the idea of this index, and it's early doors, but it's to support intentional campaign strategy. So to distinguish between harm reduction, preventative and legitimization campaigns. And there's other sorts of campaigns, that's just my case study example. Avoid reactive incrementalism, driven solely by tractability, and that's what I mean. Big words, but what I mean is, we should think deeper about these choices we're making for campaigns and not just going, well, let's just get the numbers on the board. Absolutely, it's unbelievable, the suffering, I'm not denying that. I do think there's more room for thought on that, though, especially long term. And there's that line, which I totally sign up for, of like, well, the animal doesn't care. I don't know why, but I kind of, doesn't Ben Shapiro say that, like, facts don't care about your feelings, or something like that? It's kind of that term, it's like, animals don't care about your feelings, you should just help them. That's not a Shapiro accent, that's just a general American accent. And I get that, I do get that, but I don't know. Feelings matter, right? And I'll get to that in a second about feelings, actually. And like making strategic trade-offs visible and discussable, that's what I'm saying now. We should talk about this more and not just go, well, this saves this many animals, or this helps this many animals, or what does that help look like? And this is the big point I was talking about when I talk about feelings. Narrative is not just about persuading the public, it is also about sustaining activists, clarifying moral direction, and preventing strategic drift. What I mean about that is, how are we going to keep getting activists to turn up like Animal Rebellion, now Animal Rising did on their first protest during the Extinction Rebellion, occupation of London? How are we going to do that if we're demanding things that aren't morally aligned with us as activists? We can really talk about it a lot and say, well, it's a pragmatical, winnable thing. But again, it comes back to that question at the beginning. What brought you here? What got you here in the first place? And my bet, like I said, and I'm not a betting man, surely it's emotional, right? Surely. Maybe not. I would like to hear people who are like, well, actually, no, Ben, it's all about the numbers for me, and that's great. I love a good spreadsheet. But yeah. I think there's something to think about there. Activist retention. That's a big part of my PhD research. I talked to fellow artists in here. I know Jen, I've talked about Jen, about her amazing singing and how it brings activists together and it sustains activists through that, having a moral core and a moral cause to follow with the choir and her songs. All the artists as well who I've spoken to over my research. It's so important, and it gives us this kind of clarity of moral direction, which I think we need. We do need that. There'll be talks today which are like, that's a good idea, that's a good idea, that's a good idea. But where do we take that in here and in our drive? Yeah, so which campaigns moves us closer to liberation and how? It could be the pragmatic thing, get rid of the cages, the companies can't afford it anymore, they fall apart. That's a general narrative of it. I'm not convinced by that. Companies are very fickle. They'll find ways. They'll find ways around that. So how do we push this liberation cause a bit more? So yeah, I mean, that's my provocation. That's probably the 7th provocation I've brought today. And you might not have been provoked at all, which is great, but I hope I've provoked some of you in a way. I think that's important to provoke. So test it, try it. I mean, you've got the slides if you want the slides. I'm still developing it, and there's a score system involved, which I was going to put in, but then it's a bit like, why are we scoring stuff yet? So there is the opportunity to have a like points system with the pragmatic nature, and also the narrative bit as well, the integration. But I didn't include that because it's a bit too finicky at the moment. But let's talk. Develop your own Watership Index. Maybe it's a different Black Beauty Index. I don't know. That was a rubbish thing. And that's my website, Ben Hunt /Shakespeare. It's not Shakespeare. It's benhunt.info, and that's my information. And then I do a newsletter called Performing Animal Rights, and it's performinganimalrights.org. Please sign up to that. It's more theatre based and creativity based, but that's where it all stems from, a creative thought. Okay, I think that's everything. So thank you very much for listening, and thank you for your time.